Rain fell like it wanted to drown the world. The funeral crowd stood under black umbrellas, their reflections smeared across the soaked marble. Clara Mercer didn't cry. Her brother, Ethan, leaned close as the priest spoke their mother's name, his breath mixing with the scent of wet lilies. "It's all ours now," he whispered, like it was a prayer only greed could answer. Clara's hand didn't shake when she reached into her coat pocket. She turned to him slowly, eyes hollow, calm as still water before a storm. She pressed a plain brown envelope into his hand. "Mother left this for you," she murmured. Ethan smirked, slipping it into his jacket, thinking he'd already won. But inside that envelope was the key to his undoing, and the beginning of hers. As the coffin sank into the ground, Clara whispered to herself, "You'll see what she really left behind. What would you do if your brother stole your mother's last breath and called it inheritance?" The reception hall smelled of coffee and carnations. People whispered condolences like rehearsed lines, but no one looked Clara in the eye. She moved through them like a ghost, still dripping rainwater, her hair undone, her black dress clinging to her. Across the room, Ethan laughed softly with two of their mother's old friends, the charms sliding back onto his face as easily as breath. His hand brushed the envelope in his pocket. He hadn't opened it yet. Clara poured herself tea, watching him with the stillness of someone waiting for thunder. The clock ticked. Every second was a countdown. She didn't want vengeance yet. She wanted him to believe he'd won. Later that night, the storm still clawed at the windows. Clara sat at her mother's vanity, brushing strands of wet hair from her face. The mirror reflected not just her, but the framed photo of Margaret Mercer smiling from years ago, before illness, before lies. Clara opened the drawer, pulling out her mother's reel, the one Ethan thought didn't exist. Her mother's handwriting trembled across the page. "To my daughter, who stayed." The sound of Ethan's car outside broke her stillness. She folded the will carefully, whispering, "You'll see her words soon enough." Ethan entered the old study, still smelling faintly of his mother's perfume and paper. He shut the door behind him and pulled the envelope from his jacket. His fingers trembled just once before he tore it open. Inside wasn't the property deed or the check he expected, only a copy of a will, stamped copy in red ink, and a small folded note in Clara's handwriting. "You forged one. So did I." His breath hitched. Outside, the thunder cracked, shaking dust from the chandelier. For the first time, Ethan realized his sister was not the girl he could outsmart anymore. Clara watched from the hallway through a narrow crack in the door, her pulse calm, eyes steady. Ethan stood frozen in the study, the truth dawning like slow poison. She didn't smile. She only exhaled, a long, quiet breath that misted in the cold air. Behind her, the clock struck midnight, her mother's favorite hour for prayer. "It's starting," Clara whispered, more to the walls than to herself. She turned away, footsteps fading down the hall. Inside, Ethan crushed the note in his fist, unaware the real trap had already been set. 1 week before the funeral, the house still carried the low hum of machines keeping their mother alive. Clara sat by her bedside, holding a frail hand that barely returned her touch. Margaret Mercer's breath rattled like dry leaves. "Promise me, Clara," her mother whispered, eyes glassy but fierce. "Don't let him take what isn't his." Clara nodded, not understanding then what she meant. That night, after the nurse left, she found the letter hidden behind a loose drawer panel in the old writing desk, an envelope marked "For Clara only." Inside was the real will, written in Margaret's trembling script, leaving the estate to charity, and a personal note. "You are free from him now." Clara cried until dawn, not from loss, but from clarity. The next morning, the world smelled like disinfectant and rain. Ethan arrived late, sunglasses on, voice bright and false. "How's she holding up?" he asked, already scrolling through his phone. Clara didn't answer. She had already seen the transfer notifications on her mother's bank app, small withdrawals, timed too perfectly. When he stepped out to take a call, she checked the documents he'd brought for her mother to sign, and saw the forged will. His handwriting imitated the lawyer's signature almost perfectly. Almost. Clara folded it gently, like something venomous, and placed it back. Revenge didn't need rage, only precision. That night, Clara met Detective Lorne Avery at a small cafe by the pier, a man who had known their mother long before either child could walk. "You're saying he forged it?" he asked quietly, eyes narrowing. She slid the forged copy across the table, along with her mother's letter. Lorne read in silence, the sound of waves breaking against the pier filling the pause. "Do you want justice or peace?" he asked. Claire looked up, her voice flat. "Both." Days later, after Margaret's passing, Clara stood in the old attic surrounded by boxes of photographs and fading memories. Dust hung like fog in slanted light. She gathered every document Ethan might use: the property deed, insurance papers, financial records, scanning and copying each one carefully. On her laptop screen, a single folder blinked. "Ethan? Forgery." Her reflection stared back in the dark monitor, expression hollow but certain. "Let him think he won," she whispered. "It'll hurt more that way." The night before the funeral, Clara returned to the study. The house was silent except for the creak of floorboards and the sea's distant roar. She placed the brown envelope on the desk, carefully inserting the forged copy Ethan had made. And one extra note: "You taught me how to lie." She sealed it, pressed the edge flat, and stood in the dark, listening to the wind outside. Somewhere in that sound, she could almost hear her mother breathe again. Free. Unburdened. Clara smiled for the first time in months. Tomorrow, Ethan would open his inheritance and find his own guilt staring back. The morning after the funeral, sunlight cut through the rain clouds like a blade. Ethan stood in the lawyer's office, all charm and confidence. "I'll handle the transfer myself," he said, sliding the forged will across the polished desk. The lawyer, Mr. Hollis, an older man with steady eyes, adjusted his glasses and frowned. "Strange," he murmured. "Your mother's handwriting here looks off." Ethan's smile twitched. He leaned back, mask still on, voice easy. She wasn't well. Across the street, in a cafe window, Clara watched through her reflection, calm, composed, and waiting. Every lie he told built the walls of his own prison. That afternoon, Ethan drove to the family bank, his hand tapping the steering wheel in rhythm with his heartbeat. Every turn of the key felt like victory. He handed the bank manager the papers with a smile, his reflection sharp in the polished counterglass. But when the clerk returned, she didn't bring cash, only a phone. "Sir, Mr. Hollis would like to speak with you again," she said softly. Ethan's chest tightened. He forced a laugh, pretending calm. Outside, the wind began to rise, carrying the smell of the sea, and something else. Trouble. Meanwhile, Clara sat in the old study, the same room where their mother had written her letters. She played Ethan's recorded phone call on her laptop, his voice confident, rehearsed. Detective Avery sat beside her, taking notes. "He's digging his own hole," the detective said quietly. Clara didn't respond. Her eyes stayed on the waveform pulsing across the screen. "He'll open the door himself," she said. Outside, thunder rolled again, soft and distant. Justice was no longer a dream. It was a schedule. Ethan returned home that evening, footsteps echoing through the empty halls of their mother's house. His confidence cracked. The air smelled of dust and salt. On the dining table, he found a small, unmarked flash drive. A note lay beside it. "Play me." His throat tightened. He inserted it into his laptop. The screen lit up with security footage from the bank, showing him signing the forged documents. A timestamp blinked below. Clara's voice followed, calm and clear. "You taught me to watch everything." He slammed the laptop shut, breath ragged. Clara sat on the porch, rain dripping from the roof, watching the lights flicker in the old house. She could see Ethan pacing through the window, panic replacing pride. "Mother," she whispered, "you always said he'd choke on his own lies." Lightning flashed, painting the yard in white. For a moment, she saw her mother's reflection beside her in the glass. Calm, proud, gone. Clara's expression didn't soften. Revenge, she realized, didn't roar. It whispered. And tonight it was whispering through every wall. Morning broke cold and colorless. Ethan woke to pounding on the front door. Sharp, official. His head throbbed from a sleepless night. When he opened the door, Detective Lorne Avery stood there with two officers, a folder in hand. "Mr. Mercer," Avery said evenly, "we have some questions about your mother's will." Ethan tried to laugh, but it came out cracked. "There's been a mistake." The detective raised an eyebrow. "There has." Ethan's eyes darted to the hallway mirror, behind Avery. Down the street, he caught sight of Clara standing by her car, watching. For the first time, he realized the mistake wasn't the police showing up. The mistake was underestimating her. Inside the study, Avery laid out the documents. 2 wills, side by side. One signed a week before your mother passed. The other 2 days after, he said. Voice steady. Ethan's hands trembled. "You think I'd forge my own mother's will?" he snapped. Avery didn't look up. "I don't think," he replied. "I verify." From the folder, he pulled a photo, bank footage showing Ethan signing papers. Silence filled the room. Outside, Clara's car engine started, the sound cutting through the stillness like punctuation. Clara sat in her car down the street, watching through rain-speckled glass. Her hands rested still on the steering wheel. She didn't need to see his face. She could imagine every twitch of panic, every excuse forming and dying in his throat. A single tear escaped, though she wasn't sure if it was for her mother or the brother she once loved. The radio hummed softly with static, blending with the patter of rain. "Forgive me, Mom," she whispered. "But he has to see it." By evening, news had spread through the small town like wildfire. Local businessman under investigation for will forgery. Ethan sat alone in his car, parked by the pier watching the ocean churn. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "She told you not to take what wasn't yours." He knew the voice behind those words. He looked at the water, breathing hard, face twisting with anger and fear. "You think you've won, Clara," he muttered, knuckles white. But somewhere deep inside, he already knew. She didn't need to win. He just needed to lose. That night, Clara returned to her mother's grave. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick and clean. She placed a single lily on the wet soil. "Hell face what he did," she whispered. The moonlight caught her face, half in shadow, half in peace. She thought of Ethan, not as her brother, but as the boy who once shared secrets under this same sky. "You were right, Mom," she said softly. He couldn't love anything he couldn't own. In the distance, police sirens rose faintly, carried on the wind like a requiem. Clara didn't turn. She only closed her eyes. The storm inside her had finally quieted, but the world around her had just begun to listen. The next morning, Ethan stormed into the study, his face red with anger and exhaustion. Papers fluttered across the desk as he slammed his hands down. "Clara, what did you do?" His voice cracked like glass. Clara looked up from her laptop, calm and composed, her dark eyes cold. "I showed you what you already were," she said softly. Ethan staggered back, confusion and fear battling in his eyes. You can't ruin me like this," he shouted. Clara's lips curved slightly. "No, Ethan. You did this yourself. You just didn't expect to watch it happen." For the first time, he realized that the sister he'd underestimated had orchestrated his undoing from start to finish. Ethan sank into the chair across from Clara, finally silent. His hands trembled. I never thought you'd. He stopped, choking on his words. Clara didn't interrupt. She watched, letting his guilt fester. Why? He whispered, voice low. Because you taught me to fight? To watch? To lie? Clara replied. You trained me for this moment without even knowing it. The truth hung heavy between them, thick as fog. Ethan's facade crumbled. Pride, stripped away by the one person he had always assumed, would follow blindly. Clara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone, pressing record. Say it, Ethan, she said quietly. Say what you did. Admit it. Let it come out so the world can see it. Ethan hesitated, panic coursing through him, but the weight of the moment crushed his resistance. I forged the will, he stammered, voice shaking. I took her money. His confession tumbled out, raw and jagged. Clara didn't flinch. She let him crumble under his own guilt. The sound of his voice, captured forever, was the final proof of a lifetime of lies. The room fell silent after the confession. Ethan buried his face in his hands, trembling. Clara stood, walking toward the window, watching the sea churn in the distance. It's done, she said softly, more to herself than to him. Ethan lifted his head, voice hoarse. You could have gone to the police yourself. Clara's lips tightened. I wanted you to feel every second of what it's like to be exposed, to see your reflection unmasked in your own guilt. Outside, seagulls screamed, wind tearing through the curtains like sharp whispers of judgment. Later that night, Clara returned to her mother's room. The bed was empty, silent, but her presence lingered like warm sunlight. Clara knelt beside it, tracing the edge of the old quilt. You were right, she whispered. Some wounds can't be unseen, and some truths must be faced. She rose, straightened her coat, and looked out the window at the distant lighthouse. Its beams swept across the black waves, cutting through darkness. Tonight, justice had been served, not in rage, but in the quiet clarity of exposure. The morning fog hung thick over the coastal town. Police cars lined the Mercer driveway as officers carefully escorted Ethan out in handcuffs. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispers swirling like smoke. Clara, 28, stood on the porch, coat pulled tight, expression unreadable, watching her brother, 31, being led to the squad car. His eyes met hers for a brief moment, a mixture of shame, fear, and bitter recognition. No words were spoken. Justice had arrived not with rage, but with inevitability. The wind carried the scent of the sea and rain, cleansing the town of secrets that had festered for years. At the courthouse, Ethan sat in the defendant's seat, head bowed, the courtroom buzzing with murmurs. His former charm couldn't reach across the heavy oak paneling. Clara observed from the gallery, her notebook filled with her own meticulous notes of the confession and evidence. Every time the prosecutor presented a document, Ethan flinched. Every time the lawyer questioned him, he faltered. She realized then that justice was not only about punishment, it was about truth being seen, witnessed by everyone who had once ignored it. Outside the courthouse, townspeople gathered, whispers tumbling like waves. Some looked at Clara with admiration, others with envy or unease. She didn't meet their eyes. She only focused on the quiet triumph of truth, that the brother who had once believed he could take everything had lost everything. Instead, Detective Avery approached her, tipping his hat. Well done, he said quietly. Clara nodded, feeling the hollow weight of victory. Justice wasn't loud. It was exacting, precise, and utterly silent. Back at the Mercer farmhouse, Clara walked through empty halls, touching objects that once carried memory. She opened drawers, looked at photographs, and breathed in the scent of old wood and salt air. She found the envelope she had given Ethan months ago, now a relic of a plan perfectly executed. She placed it back in the drawer, knowing its work was done. In that silence, she felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Victory was hers, but the echoes of betrayal would always linger like shadows across the walls. That night, Clara returned to the cliff overlooking the ocean, the wind whipping through her hair. She looked down at the waves, white against dark water, crashing relentlessly against the rocks below. In the distance, the lighthouse swept its slow, deliberate beam across the sea. For the first time in months, she felt the weight of her actions settle into quiet resolve. Justice had been done. Ethan would face the consequences. And for Clara, the horizon was clear. A life rebuilt on truth, not lies. Weeks later, the Mercer farmhouse sat empty, windows reflecting the calm gray of the sea. Clara walked through the rooms one last time, her footsteps echoing softly on the wooden floors. She held the final deeds in her hands, the estate signed over to the charity her mother had chosen. The envelope that had begun it all rested on the mantel, sealed and untouched. Clara's lips curved faintly. She could feel the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. The storm finally passed. The house smelled of salt and old wood, memories settling into quiet peace. Clara stepped outside, the wind carrying the scent of the ocean and rain-soaked earth. She watched the waves crash against the cliffs below, each one a reminder of the turmoil she had endured and the justice she had ensured. For a moment, she let herself imagine her mother standing beside her, proud and relieved. Clara closed her eyes and inhaled the cold, clean air. The past was behind her. The future belonged only to her. At the charity office, Clara signed the final documents. She paused, looking at the walls lined with photographs of children, families, and homes rebuilt. A small smile touched her lips. Her mother's wishes were fulfilled, not with fanfare, but with steady, careful hands. Every injustice reversed, every secret laid bare. Clara felt a warmth she hadn't known in years. Not revenge, not victory, but peace. Returning to the Mercer graveyard, Clara knelt by her mother's stone once more. She laid a fresh lily atop the damp earth, rain having softened the soil. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying memories and unspoken words. "It's done, Mother," Clara murmured. She pressed her palms together, closed her eyes, and let the silence wash over her. No anger, no bitterness. Only the calm certainty of justice completed and a life reclaimed. Finally, Clara returned to the cliff, the same one where storms had once raged and decisions had been made. She stood in silence, the sea stretching infinitely before her. The brown envelope had been tucked away, her brother's betrayal documented, her mother's wishes honored. Clara felt the weight of her journey lift, replaced with clarity and strength. The lighthouse flashed in the distance, sweeping over waves and rocks, a quiet reminder that even in darkness, light could guide the way.